Hey everyone, how you doing? Fabian here, founder and CEO of Shift Insurance. Today, I have our first guest of the first episode on our YouTube channel, Darin. He is the owner of Legion Fitness. Darin?
Hey, thank you very much for coming out here. I really appreciate you spotlighting us.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a part of this and part of our home, and welcome. I'm really glad to be a part of the first episode of this.
Yeah, man.
This is super exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting for me because, for us, really what we want to do is we want to collaborate with business owners who are doing things in their space, and really kind of pull out of those business owners what it is that they did or what it is that they went through to be in the position that they're currently in. And so let's get right into it. Tell us a little bit about your journey. Where did you start?
So I won't go all the way back to 1985 where I was conceived. What we'll start with is really in the Army. I loved it. I was infantry and we did a lot of hard stuff, right? And I'm gonna do my best to curb my language, just so you know.
Actually, it's all good.
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
totally fine.
Perfect.
Totally
so
fine.
Good, because I'm just reminding everyone that I was in the Army and sometimes I might let some things slip out. But yeah, so I was in the Army and it turned out that I had some knee and shoulder issues that made it almost impossible for me to stay infantry. Along that time, I started going through my divorce, my daughter was born, there was a lot of things going on. But I was going to physical therapy, and physical therapy was one of those things that really opened my eyes to the differences on how we look at physical fitness, not only for ourselves on where we want to be, but how other people view physical fitness, in demanding jobs like military, police, fire, and what they expect of us and the gap that goes in between. So that physical therapist, that physical therapy office really just kind of opened up my eyes to this huge gap that I had been missing out on. So I spent the rest of the time in the Army really just trying to recover and recuperate. I eventually got out, came back home and said, I want to become a physical therapist.
Right on.
And so I started my journey to become a physical therapist, and I started going to school. And I don't know if you remember, but I was a real big fuck up when it came to school. And I tell this as a cautionary tale to people. I know a lot of people probably have kids, and we kind of let our kids get away with things. But I will say school is extremely important. For me, I was a fuck up in school. And so when I came back out, I really had to make up for lost time. I barely graduated high school, and I went to the Army and had to relearn things just so that I could be able to do jobs, right, inside of the military. As an infantryman, I had to go back and learn how to do math and reading.
No way.
That's embarrassing. Yeah.
No way.
So I had to relearn how to do math and reading at a level that the infantry will take.
That's crazy that they saw fit. Yeah.
So there was that. I mean, I tested really well out of there, but it's just some things I just wasn't as high up in.
I got you.
So when I came out, I had to go back into college, and before I had left for college for the Army, I basically flunked out of college, and so I had to go back to that. And that took years of work, but I eventually got myself an associate's in math and science. So go from not knowing math very well to get associates in math and science. I got a bachelor's in kinesiology or applied exercise science, and later went on to get a master's in kinesiology. So I always say school is very important. Never undersell your potential in school.
And don't underestimate
don't underestimate yourself.
That the school has and the potential that going to school can have on your career.
I think for me, growing up, the motto that other people had for me was, Darin has a lot of potential, and I ignored that. And so,
That's big.
That's
huge.
And I think that when you don't listen to that, you ignore these things, people think, I'm a big proponent of everyone has a lot of potential. So listen to that and work through that. But so that's where—
There's a reason people are telling you that.
Right.
They see something. Sometimes people will see something in you that you don't see yet in yourself.
And for me, it was just learning how to work hard. I never really knew how to work hard. I played a lot of video games as a kid. I was a huge nerd.
I remember that. So there were a couple times when we would go to the house, and he had all the games, by the way. All the games. So I would go to his house and I want to play them, and he was heavy, in the middle of a game, and I'd be like, "Come on, Darin, am I going to be able to play?"
Nope, busy.
So he actually killed the joy for me growing up in video games. So I never played video games after that. We're working our traumas out right now.
Yeah, we're just fleshing them out.
So you said something right now. Well, actually going back to you joining the Army and being in the Army, first and foremost, thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thanks for your support.
I think our viewers also, on behalf of them, will also say that they, thank you for your services as well. That's a big deal. I actually remember when you took off. I think you were in Hawaii. And I called when I found out you had joined the Army, and I was like, dude, no way. My cousin Darin's in the Army. That's crazy. Where's he at? Oh, he's in Hawaii. I was like, dude, let me call him. And so I think that same day when I found out, I gave you a call, and I was like, hey man, congratulations. How you doing? Thank you so much for everything you got going on out there. Stay safe. Stay strong. Be good. Do your thing. You know what I mean? And it wasn't years later until we would reconnect again, but it was crazy because I remember growing up with you. You always did. You had a lot of energy. A lot of energy. I felt like
you had a lot of energy too.
Yeah, we did, and that's kind of why we would go at it sometimes, because we were just two little bodies running around in the same room, and we would just, we had
molecules colliding in the same space.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. But you mentioned something. You went from not going to school, right, and not not wanting to participate in the activity of going to school and doing that thing. You went from that to completely turning that around and then going full at it, and then you earning your degrees and then doing what you did. And look, for me, when I hear that, something happened. Your commitment level changed.
Right.
And so how important do you think, for our viewers, how important do you think commitment is in the workplace, in personal life? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
The way I describe my school experience and like what happened, I was taking math and I didn't know anything, and I was struggling. And I was dating a girl at the time who was phenomenal at it, but she had very little patience for helping me. Bless her heart, though, she did. She did help me, and but very little patience for it. And I met this professor, and his philosophy was repetition will gain success. And
I love that.
so, what do we do when we do math, right? Like, most times we try to learn how to do it, but we very seldom repeat it over and over and over again, because 2 + 2 is 4, right? Yeah. We know that. Once we know that, we don't practice it. Yeah. But as things get more complicated, we build a foundation, and we get to a point where we're working on higher levels, right? Yeah. And so his philosophy was that you are going to practice, and you're just going to reach higher levels doing it, and that's what I did. And so, not all of it was just by choice. It wasn't just, I'm going to do this because, right? But there was a definite moment where I sat down and said, if I want to be successful, and I do, and if this is something that I want, and it is, I have to take what is being put in front of me as a serious challenge. I have to take all of the distractions, and I have to take all of the bad behaviors, and I have to take all of those things, and I have to set them aside. Yeah. And I have to put them, and I have to say, look, toys, I can't play with you right now.
Yeah. Video games.
Right, all that stuff. And I had to say, look, now is the time for me to really focus on what these are. And so, this guy was nuts. He would give 200, question workbooks, and you'd have to have them all done by, the end of the week. And, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you don't know how to do it, it's a struggle. Yeah. And so then it's, okay, I'm going to dedicate the time. Yep. And what happens when you don't know something, right? Do you give up and do you quit? Right. Or do you go out and find answers?
And most people would, man. Yeah. Most people would give up and quit. Yeah. They have this most people have that concept. And look, when I say that and you say that, I'm sure I speak for myself too. I've had that experience, which is why I can say it, where you start something, you fail at it, and then you're like, oh, this isn't for me. And then you bail, and then you move and you do something different. Yeah. But you said something right now that's very important. And I live by this mantra too, because it is important to understand that quantity will breed quality. But you don't get to quality until you do the thing several times, and then you get grooved in. I like to always compare physical fitness to everything else that I'm doing. Yeah. Like in business, you got to keep showing up and doing the thing, right? And then your delivery, your value, if you have a commitment to it, you just get better at it. Right. You know what I mean? And so I love what you said there. Let me ask you something. You talked about getting serious with success. And you said, and I do want to be successful. Like, you know, we're actually cut from the same cloth, so it's kind of unfair to our viewers to really talk about this because we don't come from completely different spaces. We grew up around each other, but, you know, for me, for example, growing up, you know, we didn't really have much.
Right.
You know, we didn't really have much. We didn't have access to a lot at the time when we were growing up. And seeing that, although it was, you know, something that we probably wouldn't ideally have wanted for ourselves, seeing that, you know, it created a spark in me, at least, to want more, to want to produce more, not just for myself, but eventually as I kept producing for the people around me. Why is it so important to you? Why is success to you so important? I
mean, it's for my family, right? It's not to get my name, immortalized for anybody. You know, I don't expect to ever have that. But, you know, a little bit of a difference between us is that, you know, my family, they might have had a little bit more. And I came from a side of the family. I had a side to my family that maybe had a little bit more. And that might have bred a little bit of laziness into me when I was younger. And, you know, looking back and seeing that, I was ashamed of that. And seeing what my grandfather and my grandmother were huge, not like they were just huge inspirations for me. My grandfather, he worked himself from the ground up at his company till he was eventually CEO and took his company public. And it's super inspiring. You see someone do that and you're just like, how do I do that? And so over time, I eventually became really curious with what was his mentality. Just like how we're having this conversation now, I would sit down and say, Grandpa, like, what did you do? Like, walk me through some of these things that was different for you. And I would pick little bits of wisdom. And so, you know, for me, it was kind of like, what would Grandpa do? You know what I mean? And so like, for me, how do I get to those places that I want to be? And yeah, my family, it's super important that I do this for my family. And I haven't led this, you know, life altering mentality all of my life. You know, it's like, and I haven't been doing it in my formative years and even in my young adult years. It was really within the last 10 years, which is kind of late in life, right? You see some people out there, they're, you know, in their 20s and they're starting to try and find their way to millions, right? So for me, it was.
I'm a big proponent, though, that everything comes at its appropriate time.
Yeah.
You know, like it all, like for me in my life, at least, you know, everything that we've had, every shortcoming, every blessing, it's all come at its appropriate time for us. And it was always it was always the right time because it was the time where I was open to receive it. I was open to accept it. I was open to understand what was happening. You know, it just happened. Eventually I would come to the point where I'd be like, now I know why this happened to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
My grandmother's favorite expression was, thank God for unanswered prayers. Right. So, you know, when you're walking around in life, and when you're walking around in life and, you know, you're like, I want this now. Right. And you don't get that. But then another door opens up. Right. That is one of those things where it's just like, thank God for unanswered prayers because you don't know what would have happened through that door entirely. But then when you walk through the door that you were meant to and everything just opens up. An example of that was I was going to Cal State San Bernardino for my bachelor's, and it's a big school. It's beautiful. And for me, I mean, look, this is where I'll get a little bit into my faith, just a little bit. So
there's no problem with that either, brother.
And so for me, it was I wasn't big into my faith, but I kept on. I'm a big person about listening to the universe and how is the universe speaking to me, and am I paying attention to all the signs out there? So when, you know, school was very big. It was a big college, big campus, and, you know, little things people kept on mentioning, you know, like Azusa Pacific University. It's a private Christian university, right? Smaller campus, this and that. And it was the little hints of people saying, you know, well, why aren't you going there? This is this. And why would you ask me that? I've never even thought of going there. I'm not even like a practicing Christian. I was raised Catholic, right? Like why is, and this kept on happening until finally I said, I'm gonna go find out what this is about. And this was also shortly after I had a counselor at Cal State San Bernardino tell me, you're probably never going to be very successful in this field.
They told you that?
Yeah, absolutely. They said your grades aren't good enough. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They said your grades they're just not enough. You're in a very competitive field. You want to be a physical therapist, and you know they're just not competitive enough. And it was actually that statement that made me want to get my master's degree too, because I just never felt good enough. But I ended up saying, I'm going to go to APU. I'm going to go to this college and see what they're about. And, I met mentors and friends and people who challenged me. And it was never, you're not good enough. It's, hey, let's help make this thing better. Let's make your knowledge better.
Let's improve on it.
It's improve on it, right? And it just took me back to the, you're never going to be good at math, but you're going to do a lot of math and you're going to get better at it.
That's
right. And so
to quantity.
Back to quantity, right? Yeah. So it was just that quality just eventually kicked in from there.
Super sick.
Yeah.
Super sick. How important do you think, I mean, look, for me, when we talk about quantity, we're talking about doing things plenty of times to get better at it. But that aside, we're also talking about family and having, being in close proximity to certain people or having access to certain things, influence your decision making.
Right.
For me, in order for me to, say, for example, to focus my efforts on my physical activity, my mind, body, and soul, I have to pay attention to it.
Right.
But one of the things I've found that while I'm paying attention to it, I still have the space or the people around me. Yeah. And maybe they're not interested in that. How important for you has it been, the people that you've kept around you? Well, has that played a role?
The people around you make a huge difference, right? Yeah. Like they're not just there beside you. Sometimes they are the people holding you up, right? So it's kind of like you're standing in a storm, right? And the more people that you have around you, they help keep you centered, right? You could like wave to your left, and you'll always have someone there to support you, right?
Yo, where are you going? What are you doing?
Exactly.
Why are you doing that?
And that's very important, right? Because when I was first starting to work on this business, or even when it was first a concept, I had a lot of people tell me, you can't do that. It's expensive, right? It takes a lot more than what you have. You can't do that. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to compete? There's already businesses like that. Why would you do that?
Right.
And that's a fog that weighs on you, right? Until suddenly I started hearing people say, that's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
Or why aren't you doing that? Or how can I help you do that? Right? Yeah. And so it's a big, honestly, shift, right? It's a big shift into what your mentality becomes when you're going from being told this negative stuff, and you can almost like shrink down and think so small of yourself, and then to have other people like come up behind you and put their hand on you and say, hey man, you can do this because I believe in you. Right. And because all these other people around you believe in you. So yeah, it's very, very important to have people around you, and you're going to have people that they do support you and they say they support you, and maybe they do. Right? Maybe they support you
in their own way.
But there's not all the way in it, and that's okay, right? Yeah. That's where your own strength of mind really takes over. But having those people, it's everything.
It's important.
It is absolutely.
I've had those scenarios too, where I go through it. You make a choice. You want to correct something. You want to change something about maybe your activities or your involvement in things. And dude, I've been involved in all kinds of stuff, man. I've had moments in my life where I'm just like, dude, I need to make a change. Yeah. I'm so sick and tired of dealing with this. But the people around me weren't tired of it, right? And for me, that's when change really occurs. That's when the shift really happens, right? When you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of being in that same situation or circumstance, or
that's
dealing.
Form of support and love too, though.
Yeah.
Right. They loved and supported you, not to judge you and try to.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a form of it.
It is, and it's important, right? Because you're not being judged, but at the same time, if you want, like we talked right now about, asking for things and wanting them now, but not getting them, right? In my opinion and in my experience in life, I've learned that kind of thing happened a lot to me because I wasn't ready for it yet. Something I needed to grow in a certain area to be ready to receive that blessing, right? Yeah. And in order for me, and this again is my experience, but in order for me to have grown in that category or in that area, I needed to seek, reach up, reach out, right? And then, what I realized is some of the people I was keeping around me, they just weren't the type of person that was going to help me. Yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, Here's the reality. The reality is my mom's been there for me my whole entire life. She's the first person that pushed me. She pushed me out the womb.
Yeah.
Right? She's always been there. She's always supported me. But my mom's never been in business. Right? She's never ran a business. And so I love her and I go to her for certain advice at times, but I couldn't come to her totally 100% to coach me on how to run a business. Right? I had to seek information from someone else. I had to reach up, right? I had to get out of my comfort zone, reach up and reach out. And so that's the reason I bring that up is because, you know, so many times I found myself where I'm like, dude, I'm surrounded by certain people, you know, that I love. They love me and we support each other. But in order for me to take this to another level, right? Whether it's my mind, body, and health, my business, my marriage, being a father, you know, I got to start looking outside of the box because, you know, some of these people can't help.
Yeah. And just to kind of like piggyback off that, we grow out of the chaos, right? And so that discomfort or that pain, it's like when a caterpillar is coming out of that chrysalis, right? Like you have to struggle, right? You have to fight a little bit to have that growth. And out of that struggle comes something really beautiful. And like you said, you relate it to fitness and it's the same thing, right? Like you don't just get all of your results by taking it easy, right? You have to work really hard. You have to stay consistent. You have to stay disciplined. You have to stay.
A little bit of pain is involved.
Exactly, right? And so you're going to have things, whether it's in business or in fitness or life in general, right? You're going to have these things that are uncomfortable, and there's going to be some pain. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be a lot of things that cause you even some fear. And it's just important to understand what your target is and just keep shooting for that target.
100%.
Because if you give up, then you'll never experience what your goal is to experience.
Or your potential.
Or your potential.
Or your potential.